haven't started the car in like a month, maybe. Been a little while. I just charged up the battery because it was probably really low. So hopefully it will start, but we don't know. It's still a mystery. Let's hear how she sounds. This is how it should sound, you know, with the timing right and the right plugs in and whatnot. This, I believe, is what your car should sound like. Not like mine used to sound, although that was fun. Alrighty, we'll get the charger back on it. Gonna give it another try. Alrighty. Okay, we've had a couple of test tries. And this battery's pretty weak. So, it did not start. But you know, they say the third time's the charm, right? So, take the key out, give her a turn. Down to about 900. I used to have it idle around 500. It had this nice little kind of looping to it. But now that I readjusted the timing to where it should be and stuff like that, this is probably about what it should be like. So, does it run? Yes, it does. Do I have a tripod to hold the camera? No, I don't. Where can I put this thing? I don't have anywhere to put this thing. Is not perfect. It has some problems, but it runs real good. And I'm going to get to work on that car so I can drive that car, because I miss that car a lot. Well, this car is pretty rough, especially if you look at the interior here. Like, this is the original leather steering wheel cover. Oh yeah, it's even got some dust. And definitely cracked. The plastic up here is pretty rough shape. This whole car could use the interior gone over. We've got all the parts, even the door things here, but it's just in 35-year-old rough shape. These are actually leather seats. I did recondition and soften the leather. They will come back if you put some stuff on them. But I did that like 10 years ago, and they're kind of dried up again. These were actually really super crunchy. But put some leather cream on them, give it like a couple of weeks, then they become all nice and soft again. However, this stuff does not. It's just done. So some kind of recovering would make all this a lot better. I have all the panels. There's a panel there covering the ECU. Not sure. There's the license plate that sits there because the license plate holder thing broke. So hey, let's look at the ranch. And at one point, this car was all shiny, like super shiny, like mirror, polished mirror. But the clear coat failed. This is just rattle can clear coat. And when it failed, I tried covering it again, and that's why it's got all these runs in it. I never fix them up. It rusted through there. So it's just a little bit of surface rust, enough to wreck the mirror finish, but not enough to really weaken it. This hood, I left this hood out for a couple of years, and the whole hood was covered in rust. And then I made a rising sun pattern on it. I made a hole in it, rising sun pattern, and used a wire wheel and cleaned up the rust here. And I put clear coat over it, and well, it was an art project. So that I could have a special hood just for this party here. Yeah, buddy. This is party mode. Okay, so back to the ranch. There we were. We fussed around with this thing for too long, and it's still wrong. We'll fix it later. But let's talk about this. Okay, so to start off with, the most obvious thing is the exhaust manifold. The turbo exhaust side manifold points up instead of down, and that's because it's from a transverse mounted engine. And it's from a, I think a 4G63 or 4G64, something like that. Normally it would sit up in the front and point down. I've turned it around here so that it points up, and I've added this flapper here through the hood. No worries though, got the original hood over here. So this is just a fun hood that wasn't worth polishing, and so I left it outside, and it got rained on, and then it got rusted, and then it became an art project. This is just some hardware right from a auto parts store. It's self-clearancing. It's hitting here. These stock motor mounts are you know, not the most tight thing, so this engine fluxes quite a bit, and you can see this part here is dented in the exhaust while it does that, and of course the exhaust blows all over the place in here. Has made a nice coating on stuff on this side of the engine, although this side is still fairly clean. I did polish this like 10 years ago. Looks like I've got a little bit of a coolant leak to look after. And what other problems do we have here? Let's see. Anyway, so where were we? This motor is mostly stock. This obviously is not, and this is obviously is not. But I do have the parts to put it back into stock. And what's even better is I have the part that goes back here that is stock, except for that thing is hot as anything. It is stock except for I modified it to fit a larger turbo wheel, so it looks stock, but it's not. Basically, I can turn this car from Dr. Jekyll to Mr. Hyde. Like, this is Mr. Hyde because it's all like a monster, but you put it back and it looks totally stock, and stock hood, stock exhaust, but it still has the big turbo inside it. This turbo is all Mitsubishi parts, but they've been slightly modified, put together in a different way, basically, to do the same sort of thing. This way you can put a lot more different type of turbos on here. It used to be, it's hard to find the 30-year-old turbos that this car came with, But the ones that are 10 or 15 years old, they have different, they mount on the car a little bit differently. But now this car's been modified so it can take those turbos too, and that makes it a lot easier to replace the turbo on this car, which is why I changed all of this. It also makes it a lot easier to put a larger turbo on this car than this car was originally intended for. In fact, this turbo has an output of 15 pounds. It has an output of 500 CFM, and the original turbo had an output of 320 CFM at 15 pounds, but it only ran at 7 pounds. So it was probably, this whole fuel system and everything was probably designed for around 150 to 200 CFM of turbo, and I'm running about 500 CFM of turbo. So that makes it have a much higher output. And it's about twice as much power as the stock motor, with just a few minor changes. Even with the factory exhaust on it, it still runs pretty good. This is just a lot of fun, I tell you. Flames shooting out of your hood is a lot of fun. I didn't know I needed flame shooting out of my hood until I had flames shooting out of my hood, and then I was like, oh, this is just, it is so hilarious. It is so, you can't drive this car, someplace. You won't be able to register this in like big cities because of the emissions. You'll never pass emissions with flame shooting out of your hood like this. But rural places, whatnot, you can actually drive around like this and not get pulled over, not get a ticket. I don't drive this car every day, but I've had this car for several years now, and I've never gotten a ticket or any complaints about it. Although my neighbors probably do not enjoy it. It is loud. It is unbelievably loud. I cannot express how loud this is. This is like being at the racetrack. That's how loud this is. There's like, you can see how little exhaust there is. There's no muffler. There's just pipe coming straight out the hood and flames. So it's very, 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 very loud. But the rest of the car is actually pretty near stock. I have taken it apart and cleaned it and whatnot, put it back together, but it's, in fact, I've disassembled this whole motor probably a long time ago when I got this motor. First thing I did is disassemble it, reassemble it with all new seals and gaskets and everything, because it was 20 years old and all the seals and gaskets were all torn old, and I had the motor out of the car. So basically there was no machining, just assembly, cleaning, and reassembling. And of course, along the way, you do all the things that you should do to make the car more reliable, right? So this thing has a few modifications that you can't see. One of them is jet valves. There's no jet valves in it. That was something that originally in the 80s they thought would help combustion and miles per gallon and power and whatnot and all that. It didn't really help. So, but it did create a weak spot for where these motors are likely to have a failure, a head crack. You overheat the engine a little bit and then the head cracks, and then now you've got to replace the head. So one way to minimize or alleviate that is to remove the jet valves. The other modification you can't really see is down inside the engine, the timing chains, has been balance shaft elimination. There are some balance shafts in here that are supposed to counteract the uneven forces of the engine as the engine runs, because it's inherently unbalanced. Inline 4 motor. And to counteract that, there are these things called balance shafts that sort of spin around and sort of help stabilize the motor, kind of a thing. At any rate, they run on chains that run the oil pump, same chains that the oil pump runs on in the timing chain. And if for some reason your bearing should fail in your balance shafts, that will cause a problem with your chain, and your chain breaks, and then all of a sudden your engine is not pumping oil anymore, and that can cause a catastrophic failure. So to avoid that catastrophic failure, you remove the balance shafts and the chains involved and simplify it to just a little smaller chain. It really reduces all the complications on the front of the motor, and makes it a lot less chance of that breaking the motor at some point or causing a catastrophic problem. The balance shafts are you might call it a creature comfort. They make the engine more less vibration-y. It's a comfort thing mostly. So removing it makes the car theoretically less comfortable to drive maybe, but it makes it less likely to fail. So I've done those things to modify the engine to definitely get the most out of the motor. There is some power gains because not driving those balance shafts frees up a few more horsepower maybe, but it's minimal, maybe 5 horsepower or something like that. It's not that much. Also, I've removed the AC compressor. In fact, you can see this bracket has been modified. I'll get in here, but it's been modified. I cut off a bunch of it to reduce and make it easier to get in here to work on the car. I don't know why a sports car would want AC, but I didn't. I removed it. It makes it a lot easier to get to things like if you're working on this motor and you need to get underneath the intake manifold, like putting in the intake manifold bolts and stuff like that. It's a whole lot easier now. Anyway, so those are modifications that were done to the car to make improvements to it. They don't really get you, they're not like power modifications except for the turbo. The turbo definitely is a power modification, but it also makes it easier to repair the car. Those are all things that were done to make the car hopefully better, easier to repair, and less likely to, you know, have problems. Cars are notoriously blowing head gaskets all the time. Well, I don't really have that problem. In fact, I've even reused head gaskets, pulled off head gaskets and just to check things and put them right back on and rebolted them down and reused them for a while. So I don't really have that problem with blowing head gaskets, but it does happen if you overheat the car. And a good way to prevent that is to upgrade the cooling system. What I've done to this car is I've taken the clutch fan off of a older car. This car originally had electric fans, and those electric fans are about 10 amps each, and there were 3 of them. There were 2 back here and 1 here, and each of them, they have like a 10 amp draw, and this alternator down here is 55 to 65 amps, something like that. So it's only 60 amp, and these 3 fans were taking up half of the electrical load. And so to take a load off the 30-year-old electrical system, I removed the electric fans and I put a clutch fan. And the nice thing about a clutch fan is it works no matter what. If the engine's running, it's working, and you don't have to worry about an electrical problem causing your car to overheat, because that really sucks. So that's another modification I've done to the car to help gain reliability. And I think there's other cars you might be able to pull the same set off of that'll bolt right up to this car, like maybe from a truck or a van. But this was all pulled off a Starion. This was off another Starion. This shroud was from a different car, Starion, and this clutch fan, and they all bolt right up with no problem. It looks like factory can, well, except for the parts where I cut it here. Anyway, so those are the modifications to this car: the turbo, the jet valves in the cylinder head, the balance shafts in the engine block, the cooling system, and thereby the electrical system has been modified a little bit to accept that. And the rest is actually all stock. The cruise control doesn't work. It's probably got a broken bladder. I think it's vacuum actuated, and I think in here there's a rubber bladder, and they typically break, I guess. And that's probably what's causing the cruise control to not work. I've actually never had a working cruise control in a Starion. But then again, I don't drive one to work every day where I'm going down the freeway for hours. I drive one to spin tires around all the way around the block or all the way up the hill. So I don't really, cruise control is not a feature I would use in this car. And that's one of the things that does not work. There are probably other things that do not work. Oh, I've also modified the fog lights so that they come on with a switch inside the car. I think those were the only modifications I've done to this car. Oh, I've also replaced the transmission with a 1988 transmission. I got a transmission from someone to replace one that I broke, and that transmission broke for unknown reasons. I do not know why. I was driving the car and the transmission just literally broke. Anyway, so I replaced it with a better transmission, one from a 1988, and you could see the gears on it were actually a little taller. So there's just a little bit more contact area where gears mesh up on it. And it looked like a brand new transmission. So I put fresh, brand new, expensive transmission oil in it, the fancy good stuff, and bolted it up and put a brand new, I think it was like a stage 2 or stage 3 clutch. I can't remember what it said, but it's like a 6-putt clutch. And that is definitely not stock. I mean, it is a stock transmission, but that clutch is definitely not stock, and it does not drive like a stock clutch. It drives like a race car. It's a little difficult when you let out the clutch. It's a little difficult to easily feather the clutch, so you usually just drop the clutch and take off. So you don't drive it like you do comfortably. You drive it more like a race car or a truck. You drop the clutch and let her go. Which makes the car a little bit less comfortable to drive, but a little bit sportier to drive. I'll tell you, that clutch, honestly, I don't know if I would have gone with that clutch if I had known what driving a car with like that kind of clutch is like. I might have tried to find a different clutch that can hold the power, because this does have a lot more power than stock. And that's one of the reasons I went with that clutch, was because it was rated for higher power. But it's kind of a pain in the drive, so a higher power than stock clutch that, you know, is more of a traditional clutch probably would have been a better choice. But it does work, it does get the job done, and it makes it so that you can do, you know, a lot better burnouts than you can in a stock car. And it does mean you can launch this car pretty hard, a lot harder than you normally would be able to. So while it's makes it a little bit less comfortable to drive, it makes it a lot more fun to drive, so it's kind of worth it. And the suspension, the wheels are definitely not stock. I spent a lot of time polishing them up. And how do you like them center caps? I've got to fix the rear ones. That's why those center caps are foil coated, because these look like this after several years. And they are color matching. They match the wheels. And these wheels need to be cleaned up and waxed. And yes, those wheels take a ridiculous amount of time to polish. And this is the original paint on here. I kept the original paint. I was very careful not to damage the paint while stripping the clear coat off and cleaning these wheels up. And they're very filthy, and I'll clean them up later. Those are all the things that are pretty much not stock. Everything else in this car is pretty much the way it came out of the factory. No AC, no electric fans, although these parts came from an earlier model, so it's all Mitsubishi stuff. The cylinder head and everything, it's all Mitsubishi parts. It's just a head that didn't have jet valves like the original one does. The balance shafts are removed from the engine to increase the ability or increase the reliability, reduce the chance of something taking the engine out or causing a problem, like no oil pressure. That's a serious problem to have in a car. So and then the turbo, of course, and I've got the original parts to make it all look stock. In fact, I've even got all the parts to make it all totally stock if you want to go back to 12A. But once you drive 16G, you won't want to go back to a 12A. It's like twice as much power. I mean, 1986, this was a fun car. But in 2021, that stock 1986 car isn't that. I mean, there are economy cars that have that kind of horsepower. So the upgrading the turbo really brings the car from the 80s to a modern, what like a modern car should be like, right? So there we are. There's a 1986 Mitsubishi Starion that I've been modifying for and getting running and taking parts off of my car to keep running. And right here, the seller's market. So let's see, how much can I get for this beauty? I've gone and cleaned it up. It was originally black. You can see the original black paint here. Of course, I stripped the paint off, most of it, but paint is stripped mostly just where you can see it. Everywhere you can't see it, the paint is protected. I did go and add some paint. You can see in here I painted and protected the rust preventer stuff on here and painted it so that it doesn't rust on the inside, just where you can see it. And this part is just about ready for putting something on there. I was thinking about putting a big Mitsubishi logo on there, just like I did the hood. That would look pretty badass. And a fun geometry project just like the hood, because that's just a geometry project. You can make that pattern with very simple tools. I use a compass and a straight edge, and it's very accurate, way more accurate than say with a with a protractor type thing. This is basically lines divided, and lines and circles, all simple division. So, and yeah, believe it or not, these look pretty shitty, but these pieces here. Oh, here, I should show you one of the other really cool things about this car. This hatch. Not only does the hatch work, but the stays open. This hatch did not come with the car. It came with a car with a black interior, and I broke the one from the factory. Yeah, I made a nice video about that. This is a prime canvas for putting some sort of fun art project. You could do all kinds of really cool stuff with this. Or it could just sand it down and paint it. I mean, that would work. Wouldn't take that long. Sanding and priming and painting would be the quickest way to refinish this, but not the most fun. This you could have a lot of fun with. It's got interesting patterns and texture to work with. Simple two-tone design like this. Up here. Yeah, buddy. And the whole rest of the car kind of matches with it. And sure, you could clean this all up and paint it, make it like a regular car. Anybody could do that. This is a little bit more fun though. So there it is. That's what this car is. That's what this car's like, and well, I kind of hate to part with it. There's very few cars like this, but this is one of the cars that's like this, and I'd really kind of like to get back to that. Look at all the parts in there that I gotta fix in this car, and the reason I can't get to this car is because I keep spending time on this car. There's a fresh canvas to do some neat stuff with, like this. Or it could even be just sanded down, or just left the way it is. Really, it's not so bad that it's damaging the car. Solid. Just like this is solid. This is all solid. It's just surface rust that, you know, is aesthetics. It is 35 years old. This is a 1986 car. So it's, you know, stuff is almost all of it stock. Got the stock shocks. The stock wheels that are definitely spent a lot of time cleaning up, and I gotta clean them and put some wax on them or something like that so they stay shiny. Brand new front tires. These back tires are some old tires. They're good for burning rubber. I got another pair over there that are just ready for burning rubber. They're some steel wheels so that you don't have to worry about messing up your fancy wheels. And of course I got the spare hood and all the stuff here to make it go back to factory, or the slightly modified factory. The other thing that I have that is modified, there's a couple of more modifications. This tint is not from the factory. I put that in. And I did have tint for the rear window. It's over here in really horrible shape because it's been outside. That I never put back on. I was going to put back on, but I broke the hatch glass trying. Made a nice video about it. At any rate, so there's no tint on the back window, but there's really good tint on the side windows, and it is a little bit illegal. This is limo tint. It's kind of dark. If they pull you over and check the tint, it's probably going to be a problem. I usually drive with the windows rolled down because the fumes from the exhaust there are so bad that you need as much fresh air coming in the car as you can. So the window tint is not factory also, and I haven't put this completely back together. I modified this. I put lights inside here. Some of the bulbs were burnt out, and it's like I wanted to put LEDs in, but I didn't want to put white LEDs, and I couldn't figure out what color LED I wanted. So what I did is I put RGB LEDs in there, and I can adjust the color to any color I like. I actually have it on color cycling because I like it to be constantly changing colors. That's the coolest. And the doors, there's LEDs under the doors that light up when you open the door, and they match the dash. They're the exact same color as whatever the dash color is. The door lights up underneath it, and those are not working right now. There's also a remote system that I put back here underneath the dash to find somewhere to keep it out of the way, that connects to all the wires, and it's not working right now either, and so I got to work on those two things before I can sell the car, because that's also causing a little bit of a drain, which is why I'm always having to put a battery on. It's because there's a little bit of a leak on it, and when you only run it every month or two, it's enough of a leak to run down the battery. So I've got to find that electrical short, and it'll probably be somewhere in the door lights or the remote system, I'm thinking, because those are both not working right. But at any rate, one of those things you got to get around to. Well, since got the camera out and the car's on the charge, let's see if it'll start. Yep, just about ready to party.